right, news broke today that Jeremy Pruitt, Tennessee head coach, has been fired for cause, meaning that they had a reason for firing him, and there was an investigation into rules violations, whatever it may be. Sounded like they didn't want Jeremy Pruitt to be their head coach, and top of that, Phillip Fulmer is also retired. So there's a lot of change going on at the University of Tennessee, and the whole thing around Jeremy Pruitt was quite interesting because if we look back 4 or 5 years ago when he was hired to replace Butch Jones, that was one of the wildest coaching searches we've seen in years. Lots of candidates turned him down. Dave Doran turned him down. John Gruden turned him down. I mean, it seemed like coach after coach after coach had turned down the Tennessee Volunteers. And so much that their athletic director at the time had actually flown out to California or wherever and got Mike Leach agreed to be their new head coach, but people didn't want that. And he got him back and he was fired. At some point, Greg Schiano was going to be their head coach. It was announced that he was, the rumors broke or whatever, and fans revolted. Clay Travis was not a big fan of it. He's a very vocal person in the Vols community. And people went nuts, and so much that they backed away from it. I don't know if they pulled I think they pulled the offer, whatever it may be. But when the dust settled, Phillip Fulmer took control as the athletic director, and Jeremy Pruitt was hired to be their head coach. And at times it looked like he was getting things going, but he never really was able to. And it just didn't seem like a mess. Didn't seem like he was a guy that was going to get him moving forward. But now he's gone, and Tennessee is looking for the next head coach. And it brings up a lot of options and who is going to be the Volunteers' next head coach. And I think the name that you have to start with, I think there are 2 big names out there that I think would be great, good candidates, and I don't know if they're going to get the job or not. But the first one is Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze was a guy that I thought when South Carolina came open, that was a name that they should go after. And when I did my video on that, when I talked about that, I mentioned that Tennessee's always kind of been that job to keep an eye on with Hugh Freeze. I think Hugh Freeze really likes it at Liberty. It's not a high-pressure job. He doesn't have to go out there and recruit against Alabamas and that. And he gets to just coach football. And at a school that's got a religious background, which was extremely important to him. And I think he enjoys it. And he's not going to just go for any open available job, but Tennessee's always been that job. He was a high school coach in Memphis, and even before he got the job at Ole Miss, he had made comments that Tennessee was one of the jobs that he would really entertain and really want. Maybe, I don't know if the term dream job came up, but that is definitely one that is out there. I think he's your top, and he's a proven winner. The guy can win football games. And so I think he's option number 1. Okay, and then you got to also look, once again, Coastal Carolina's Jamie Chatwell. Here's a guy that came up, only been a head coach there for a few years, got them to a top 15 ranking this year. Only loss was to BYU in their bowl game, and just a tremendous coach, up and coming. People were talking about him for all these various different jobs, and I think he's a guy that unique offense has been able to build up a winner at a lower level. So I think that's definitely a guy that you got to keep an eye on and wonder if he's a possible fit for what they want there. All right, some other names to kind of keep an eye on. You got to wonder, I mentioned earlier, Dave Doran. Dave Doran was a guy who was a candidate. They offered him the head coaching job not too long. When Jeremy Pruitt was hired, he turned it down at the time. He hasn't had the best success lately at NC State, but he's shown that he can recruit get some high-level NFL talent there. So I think he's definitely someone you maybe kick the tires back in on before. I mean, once you offered the job before, why not offer him again? You got a guy like Tom Herman. I know they may say I'm crazy because Tom Herman just got fired at Texas, but if you look at Tom Herman's resume and what he's done at Texas, I mean, Texas, he never got them over to that next level like you would have hoped. But if you look at his time at Texas, his record and what his accomplishments are nothing to be scoffed at. So I think he's definitely an option. And what about Lane Kiffin? Would Lane Kiffin come back to Tennessee? He seemed to kind of burn a lot of bridges, but But Tennessee fans have really embraced him. I think he's matured then. He's learned a lot. But and you wonder, why would he leave Ole Miss, one SEC job for Tennessee? The thing that's helping this job out, the thing that really helps Tennessee out, is the fact that it's in the SEC East. It's got a lot of resources. The state talent. It's not like it's Texas. It's not like it's Georgia and that. But you're in the SEC. But you're in the SEC East. You don't have to face off against Alabama and LSU and Texas A&M and Auburn year in and year out. Your toughest two opponents are Florida and Georgia, who have talent and have had success, but they're not at that elite level. So if you get in to Tennessee, a spot that that Butch Jones was able to recruit highly to, that Jeremy Pruitt was able to get some high-level recruits into, can you have success there? Hey, one last name I do want to mention. What about Gus Malzahn? I'm a big Gus Malzahn fan, and I think expectations and Auburn, whatever the mess may be there, I think he had success there. He took them to national championship games, and he's gone now. He's available. I think he'd have a lot of success at Louisville, or I think he'd have a lot of success at Tennessee. And then lastly, Billy Napier, another guy I mentioned a lot for potentially the Auburn opening, for the South Carolina opening. Here's a guy who has built Louisiana Lafayette into a winner. He's a former Saban coach. He's a former Dabo Swinney assistant coach. He's had, he's gone out to the West and got, worked in Arizona State. So I think he's another guy to keep an eye on. But as I said, I think Hugh Freeze, I think this is his job if he wants it. If he wants it, that's the guy that they should go for. That's the guy they need to target. If he wants it, I think it'd be a great hire. I think Jamie Chatwell would be fine. I think Tom Herman, Gus Malzahn would be fine. But a lot of different candidates out there for a job that's definitely, it's been one of those teams, kind of like Nebraska, where, they've had a lot of success in the 90s and just haven't lived up to the billing that, that they once had, but all the resources are there. So it'll be fascinating to see who they end up hiring.